My name is Barbara Andresen, and I am 97 years old, and I was born in Appleton, Minnesota, and we lived in town for a little while, and then we eventually moved to the farm. Oh, well, we dug around the trees. Not around the trees. We just drowned down by the roots and made a circle and put little piles. And then one time we got brave and went down to one of the houses where we had chickens, and we took a couple of eggs and took them to our little circle and made mud pies with the eggs until Mother found out.
Right now we do family night and all of these programs in the church. They just live the gospel. Never heard them argue. We were out camping once, and my uncle Laurel Hill, was laughing, and I said, "What's the matter?" He says, "I heard your parents arguing." I says, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah." And his dad would go da 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 da, and Mom would say, "Now Chester, da 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 da, now Chester." And that was the the argument that they were doing. But I grew up in a home that there was really no contention in the home. Hill Air Force Base. My dad was in the military, Second World War. My dad moved from active duty to civil service. He actually had the same desk. So he went from active duty to civil service and didn't change chairs.
My name is Richard Samuel Diet. I was born in Darby, Pennsylvania at the Fitzgerald Mercy Hospital on April the 30th, 1936 at 2:30 in the morning to James Diet and Mary Alice Price Diet, my mother and father. And we lived at 2611 McDade Boulevard in Holmes, Pennsylvania, which is a Taco Bell right now, where the house was.
I had the opportunity of being receiving some therapy when I arrived in the United States in California. The therapist was a good man. He asked me what I wanted to do, and I told him I wanted to get a job. He said, "What do you like to do? What are your hobbies?" And I said, "Well, I've always liked art." And he said, "Well, I think you should pursue that. Do art." So I started doing art. My first degree was in art and advertising, and so I went to work, got a job in the art field, and people would come into my office and say, they'd find out that I had drawn this person or that person or started painting this person or that person, and they would ask if I would paint their son or their daughter or their wife or their dead uncle or whatever. And so I started painting portraits when I was at work. And that just evolved. And I think because of that experience of having the opportunity to do art after my military has been a therapy for me. I know it has.
Okay, well, first of all, I just want to say to my posterity or friends or anybody that may be interested, it's fun to be together with you. Well, I was raised in Vallejo, California, which is in the North Bay of California, a great place to be raised, a turbulent time in history. My mother, who had been baptized previously when she was 10 in a horse trough in southeast Colorado. Met my dad when he was in the Army at a dance, and they got married and had my older sister and brother, and then we moved to Vallejo, and I was raised there. And when I was 8, my mom, who had been away from the church, came back, and I've just never left it.
He just got really sick, and it was mastoid ear infection. And at that time, they didn't have any way to treat it. And so he gave him a blessing that he would never have the earache again if he would live the commandments and do as his Heavenly Father wanted him to do. And so his earache stopped. He still had to wear a hat and be really careful, you know, growing up in his early years. But he said every time that he'd kind of feel any sensation in his ear, he was afraid that he had done something wrong. And so he was real careful, you know, always. And he lived such a good life.